Now we got it? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a good afternoon to be inside, isn't it? Uh, we are lucky here to be in the Boyd Vance Theater in the fantastic George Washington Carver Museum. And just want to welcome you to Austin by the Numbers, which is part of the Imagine Austin Speaker Series. And before I introduce my guests, just a couple of preliminaries. One is just a reminder to everyone to please silence your phones. I just did that with my own. Don't want to cause any problems here. And also just wanted to let everyone know that we're being filmed, not live, but we're being recorded by ATXN for, I believe, rebroadcast at a later time. So just be aware of that. So today we've got a great event planned, and before I give you the details, let me just make a few thank yous. People who are instrumental in putting this event together, in addition to City Manager Broadnax and City of Austin demographer Dr. Lila Valencia, who I'm going to introduce more formally in a second. Wanted to thank the planning leadership of the City of Austin, including its communications and engagement team and the Imagine Austin team. And then also a big thank you to the staff here at the Carver Museum for making this terrific venue available for this event. So just a few things about how this is going to go. I'm going to do the introductions, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Valencia, who's going to give us a slideshow and talk about some demographic trends in Austin. And then you're going to get to know your city manager a little bit. We'll have a conversation, get to learn more about his work. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A with both of the panelists, just talking about these bigger picture issues facing Austin. And then at the end, we'll have an audience Q&A, plenty of time for people out there to ask your questions of the panelists. And then we'll wrap it up. So I think it's going to be really terrific. I'm excited to hear from both of our panelists here. So introductions. Let me start with, like I said, Dr. Lila Valencia. She is the city demographer for Austin. Most cities in the US, including most big cities, don't have a demographer, but we're lucky enough to have one. And she's been in the role since, is it March 2021? Yeah, so coming up on 4 years. That's really something. And before that, she was the senior demographer with the Texas Demographic Center. So she was doing similar work, but for the state rather than for the city. She interfaced with the US Census and the Texas State Legislature. And sometime in there, she got her PhD in applied demography from UT San Antonio. And before that, she had a whole background working with the City of Austin Office of the Police Monitor, which is really interesting. And then immediately to my right, we are fortunate enough to have our city manager, T.C. Broadnax, who's been with us in Austin. Is it 7 months, city manager?
9 months.
9 months in the chair in the city of Austin. I believe you've had coming up on 25 years of experience in the city and county management world, give or take. He's been city manager before Austin and Dallas, in Tacoma, which is just south of Seattle. And he's been in other city management and county management roles in San Antonio, Pompano Beach, Florida, Broward County, Florida. I hope I'm not missing anything.
No.
And he got his, city managers move around a lot. That's what I understand about that career track. And he, at an earlier time, got his master's in public administration at University of North Texas in Denton. And I just realized I was supposed to introduce myself too. I'll be real quick about it, but I'm Jake Wegmann, and I'm a faculty member at UT Austin in planning, and I've been there since 2014, and I just looked it up, but back in 2014, Austin was a small little village that had only 901,000 people. So a lot has changed even in those last 10, 11 years, as you're going to be hearing about. But that's enough about me. Let's turn it over to Dr. Valencia to drop some knowledge on us.
Right.
I'm going to step over this way so that I'm not in the way of any slides. But good afternoon, everyone. As Professor Wegmann mentioned, I'm Lila Valencia. I serve as Austin's city demographer, and it's a pleasure to join you here today. I want to start, let's see, we'll get there, but there's a nice picture that's welcoming you to Austin in an upcoming slide, but I'll keep it going. So I'll start by acknowledging that we all have our own version of Austin. And that's how Austin ends up really with so many names. Among them, Silicon Hills, the live music capital of the world, home of the Texas Longhorns, the Austin FC Verdes that are going to be starting their season this weekend. And once called Waterloo, until it was renamed Austin and made the national capital of the Republic of Texas. But originally, it was home to the Caddo, Lipan Apache, Comanche, Tonkawa, Wichita, Coahuiltecan, and Humanos tribes and other indigenous peoples who lived and traveled along native trails that became known as El Camino Real de los Texas, or the King's Highway. That historic trail traces a similar path to the highway that many of you probably took to get here today, I-35. On the next slide, I'd like to take a brief moment to recognize my team. They're in the audience, and they are the Demographics and Data Division at the Planning Department. They've been instrumental in putting together much of the information I will share with you today. Thank you, team. So what is demography, and why does Austin have a demographer? Well, demography is the study of human population. We study the size and the makeup and geographic distribution of the population and how that population changes through births, deaths, and migration. Understanding these demographic patterns and trends can help policymakers and city staff make decisions about important topics like economic decisions, social, environmental, and general quality of life issues. Many of the topics that are covered in the city's comprehensive plan, like Imagine Austin. On the next slide, you see pictured Austin in the middle of it is the principal city of the Austin 5-county metro region of the Austin Metro. And the Austin Metro is the second fastest growing region in the country. But today, what I want to share with you is 5 demographic trends and facts that we're sharing with city leaders that I think you'll find interesting too. The first is focused on population growth. Austin has a long history of growth, but recent growth has been slowing. Austin has been doubling its population every 20 to 25 years, growing from about 250,000 people in 1970 to the 500,000 mark between 1990 and 2000, and just shy of 1 million by 2020. Last decade, Austin grew by 2% every year. Since 2020, Austin has grown by 2%, or a third of its historic rate. Our team conducted an internal analysis that determined Austin had actually surpassed the 1 million mark in 2020, and there are now 1,026,000 Austin residents. However, even when we consider the undercount in Austin, the more recent growth rates are still below historical rates. Accounting for this more slow growth rate, our population projections show Austin will reach a population of 1.15 million by 2030. The second trend relates to job growth. And like Austin's population, recent job growth in the metro area has also been slowing. According to the latest figures, Austin is the 10th most or best performing large metro, adding jobs at a rate of about 1.7% last year. This is the same rate as Texas, and it's a little higher than that of the US. But Austin job growth is typically closer to 4%, and usually higher than both the state of Texas and the US. So what we're seeing today, it represents a slower rate of growth for Austin jobs. Despite the slower job growth, unemployment in Austin is still relatively low at 3.3%. Austin's job growth and low unemployment rates draw tons of workers to our region every year from all parts of the country, really helping to boost labor force participation in the region. You can see here, Austin's labor force participation rate is about 10 percentage points higher than that of Texas and the US. However, this labor source is not unlimited. In fact, the national labor force has been shrinking since 2000. This is linked to lower fertility rates and growing shares of people entering retirement age. And while Austin is not currently immediately feeling this impact right now, it will become increasingly important for Austin to pursue labor force expansion efforts such as immigration and boosting participation. And even as Austin adds jobs, it has an increasingly smaller share of the total jobs in the metro region. Jobs are more geographically dispersed today than, say, 20 years ago, and Austin's share of the total metro jobs has declined from about 3/4 to about 2/3. The geographic dispersion of jobs has also yielded shrinking shares of Austinites who both live and work in Austin, and has increased or grown shares of Austinites who live in Austin but work outside of the city. And these shifts have important implications for regional mobility efforts and infrastructure. The third trend relates to migration. Migration continues to be the main driver of population growth in the Austin metro region. As I mentioned to you earlier, population really only changes in 3 ways: births, deaths, and migration. And so when you take all of the people who are added to the population from births, and you subtract anyone who is removed from the population through deaths, you get natural change or natural increase in the case of the Austin metro region. The remainder is net migration. So you get everyone that moves into an area, you take out anyone who moves out of the area, and you get your migration. And you can further subdivide net migration into international migration, people who move from other countries, and domestic migration, people who move from other parts of the state of Texas, as well as from other parts of the country. And historically, domestic migration has been a major contributor of growth to the Austin metro area, making up nearly 60% of all growth. An additional 11% comes from international migration, and a little over 1/4 from natural increase. This type of growth requires cities to be very nimble with efficient and effective planning efforts. If you think of a city that grows from natural increase, you're basically adding new babies to a population. These babies are typically added to already existing households. They're not going to be going to school for a few years. They won't be driving or adding a car to the highway or taking up a seat on public transit. And so the effect from growth from natural increase is relatively lagged, has a lagged impact on demand for services and on infrastructure. But when growth to an area happens from migration, the impact can be pretty immediate. Typically, migrants, when they move to an area, they're typically of working age. They're going to be looking for a place to live. They're going to be connecting to utility hookups, adding another car to the highway, or taking up another seat on public transit. And so again, this requires a really rapid response from our city. Recent figures show slower growth has been coming from domestic migration. Here you see that 60% historical figure drops to about 45%, but with a 22% share of growth coming from international migration, we still end up with a similar pattern of growth, where we are really necessitating that rapid response from our city. Lower shares of domestic migration are behind the overall smaller numeric increase in the metro between 2022 and 2023. And slower regional growth is closely tied to slower growth in the city of Austin and as well as in Travis County. When we take a look at the characteristics of recent movers to Austin, we can see hints of demographic shifts. Domestic migrants moving from other parts of Texas are young and diverse, but they're less affluent with comparatively lower educational attainment, resembling the makeup of movers of Austin of decades, or movers to Austin of decades past. Domestic migrants moving from other states are still young, but tend to be closer to 30. They're highly educated, more affluent, more often white, and more often male. Those who move to Austin from other countries are the most diverse. Slightly older, with lower incomes, education tends to vary by country of origin, and more than half are women. The next trend is related to housing unit growth. Austin added an unprecedented 90,000 housing units between 2010 and 2020, growing at a rate of 25.5%, adding more housing units than most American cities. However, that rate is slower than rates of previous decades and slower than the rate of growth of household formation, which was 26.5% last decade. And you can think of unit development growth as the supply side of the equation and household formation demand as the demand side of the housing equation. And right now, these two growth rates are a little too close for comfort. Since 2020, we've already added nearly 50% of all units added last decade. So we're positioned to surpass last decade's rate of growth for unit development. You've probably heard or read that rent prices are dropping right now. This is in part because of the rapid production that we've seen in housing of recent years. However, if development were to slow down again, we could end up right where we were at the end of 2020, with housing demand on the rise along with housing costs. This would once again disproportionately impact Black and Latino households that already have higher housing cost burdens. About 1 in 5 Hispanic and Black households experiences extreme housing cost burden, spending 50% or more of their incomes on housing. The types of units being built can also have demographic implications. Austin is increasingly a renter city, and more Austinites are living alone. Between 2010 and 2020, Austin shifted from a majority family city to a majority non-family city. These trends have implications for wealth-building opportunities for Austinites and mental health related to social isolation. The last trend I'll share with you relates to what I call Austin's unique diversity. Population growth in Austin has yielded increased diversity, but concurrently, we're seeing shrinking shares and even population decline among some populations of color. Throughout the country and the state, population growth was driven by populations of color last decade. In Texas, 95% of the total growth could be attributed to populations of color. In Austin, the non-Hispanic white population is driving growth, contributing nearly 40% of all the growth last decade. Austin was one of the small number of cities where white populations contributed more than any other group to population growth. Some interesting patterns arise as we look at population change among individual groups of populations of color. The Asian population in Austin was the fastest growing single race group, growing at a rate of 21% and became the third largest race ethnicity group in the city. The Asian population also had the greatest net increase in children. Hispanics made up about 20% of the growth last decade. This compares with about 50% at the national and state levels. Despite this increase, the share of Hispanics of the total Austin population declined for the first time since the Census Bureau began collecting data on Hispanics. The Black population also grew, but at a very slow rate. This is in the context of strong return migration by many African Americans to cities in the South, which partly added about 1 million African Americans to Texas last decade. But Austin received less than 1% of that growth. Although all the race ethnicity groups in Austin grew between 2010 and 2020, we also saw declining shares of Black and Hispanic population. Additionally, during this time, the Black and Latino child population in Austin declined. Austin today has 7,000 fewer Hispanic children and over 2,000 fewer Black children. Our latest report on household composition found Austin lost nearly 900 Black families with children and over 1,300 Latino families with children, with the steepest declines found in many historically Black and brown Austin neighborhoods. So as we look to the future, we are projecting Austin will continue its long history of growth. Even considering our slower rates of growth, Austin is projected to grow to between 1.3 and 1.7 million people by 2060. These projections assume Austin will continue to grow as it has. However, There are many things that can change in 40 years. Some changes are unexpected, but some changes can be planned to create something closer to what we want to see in our city. And that's where our city's comprehensive plan comes in. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
How about now? Is that better? Oh, I was just making a little observation that she somehow did that information-packed presentation very quickly without being rushed. And it's a magic trick that I'm jealous of. We are going to get back to that and dig into those 5 trends in a little while. But now we're actually going to shift gears a little bit and get to know our city manager, TC Broadnax, to my right. Can we start, City Manager Broadnax, can you just tell us a little bit about what a city manager is and what are their responsibilities? I think of City Manager Broadnax as the most influential Austin leader that you may have never seen in public before, but it'd be great to learn about what you do, what a city manager does.
Sure, and thank you, and thank everybody for coming today. I think today's discussion, Lila's presentation, and I think the topics we'll discuss today, I think, are really important, not just for residents, but for those future residents and folk who want to call Austin home. So as it relates to my role, I will tell you it changes every day, but as a city manager, you're right, I wish I was always behind the scenes. That's one of the reasons I chose this profession, but I guess in large cities, that's a misnomer and that doesn't happen. And so basically what I'm responsible for is the day-to-day operations of the city and ensuring that the various departments that do all the things that cities do are doing them at a level that residents would appreciate and or expect. Pretty much if this was the private sector, I serve as the CEO, if you imagine this being a for-profit business, and the city council, the mayor plus the 10 council members, are the board of directors for me, and they're the elected officials that set the policy and the rules and ordinances that are laid out for them to do in the charter, and then they turn that over to a professional manager to actually run and do the things and implement many of the ideas and initiatives and projects and the work efforts that they would expect a team to do. Got about 16,000 employees under my purview, 35 plus or minus departments. I rely heavily on my executive team, which the closest level of that to me are my assistant city managers and deputy city managers and my chief of staff, who then are responsible for the various departments within their portfolio. And they pretty much function like city managers. And that's the thing that I look for the most when I hire those type of positions, people who actually want to be me or be city managers. Then I give them the leeway and the empowerment to go out and do those things and just check in with me. And I work much closer with the city council, teasing out what their priorities are, continually refining that to really get to a body of work that I can share with my team that we need to focus on. And so that's pretty much what a city manager does, never a dull day, and I enjoy this type of work.
And can you just tell us a little bit, just give us a little bit of your background and maybe something about what got you into this line of work to begin with?
Sure. And so as you started out, I think I'm maybe 27, 28 years doing this kind of work. And I don't know, you said I move around a lot. I don't really move around that much. But born and raised in Topeka, Kansas, spent from birth to about 21, 22 there, went to undergraduate school there at Washburn University. And so that really sets the stage for why I do this kind of work. Growing up in Topeka, there were a lot of promises made to my family and my neighborhood and my neighbors about the type of things that the city was going to do for us, called redevelopment. And as I aged and grew up in my neighborhood, some 18 years in the same household, none of those things actually happened when I was growing up. And as I got older and got into college, I started to wonder who was responsible for what didn't happen. And they said, mayor and council and the city manager. And so as I went to school, I graduated with a degree in political science, knowing I was going to pursue a career in public administration. And it really set my sights on being in a city manager seat, so that if I was working for a city and actually shared with the community things that I expected and or planned to do, that I could actually hold the people along with myself responsible for actually fulfilling those kinds of activities. And so that set me on my quest to work in cities, to understand them, I think, from the ground up. Started in budget, and then community and development and economic development, and then became an assistant city manager and had a broader portfolio. Learned from one of the best in San Antonio, Cheryl Scully, and then I went off to chart my own course as being a manager and putting down values that I believe were important for cities, to actually live up to. And I've taken those values to heart, as well as to the organizations that I've led, and expect the leadership that comes to work for me and the spirit in which we perform that work to embody those values. And so that's kind of, background of why I do this work. I've always wanted to work in larger cities and made conscious efforts and decisions on career roles to get me where I'm at today, as it relates to wanting to have the biggest impact that I could have on residents. And you can only do that in large cities. And then go out and find ways to create best practices, do those things at scale to impact the quality of people's lives at the largest levels possible. And cities like Dallas and Austin give me that opportunity.
And like you mentioned, you've been at other large cities already. So what was it about Austin that made you interested in this opportunity down here?
I think growing up in a capital city, and then seeing and having the opportunity, when this opportunity came about, to actually lead a capital city, one of the largest cities in the country, a city that, as we worked in Dallas, whether it was our elected officials or our residents or our business people, would often comment about the innovation and the creativity and the things that the city council and the community were doing here in Austin. Really excited me and wanted me, in my mind, to want to find a way, if possible, to come and lead this city. And having made the decision to leave Dallas, it was a natural fit for me to want to come here. I think with all the excitement of the legislative sessions, I'm joking. I think the timing is such that I think, what Austin was looking for and what I was looking for in the next chapter of my career, I think it was right on time. And God put you in places in season and in times to do work. And I think now is a great time for me to be here, and I'm excited to be here.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that there's no such thing as a typical day for you in your job, but can you still try to paint a picture for us and tell us about, what parts of your day-to-day work do you most enjoy?
I get on my executive assistant a lot because she loads my day up. And so I don't even know how to respond to that other than to say a typical week filled by days is me having occasion to meet with the elected officials, obviously to hear what their priorities are, what their needs and challenges are, particularly as it relates to our operation and or things out in their respective districts and neighborhoods. Meeting with my department leads, meaning my assistant city managers, to get updates on what is going on. Someone's typically at my door wanting to give me a heads up on issues and challenges. Most of the days are often with follow-up related conversations for things that I've been asked to go out and look at to figure out how we can improve them. But I'll tell you, this first 8 months has really been a heavy dose of me meeting with residents, businesses, people in the creative spaces, small business owners, neighborhood-related folks, just to hear about what the city is doing, in some cases what we're not doing so well, challenges that they may have had historically, that they're hoping that I can find a way to break through and help them, and just really trying to get my bearings on the city of Austin so that I can be of better service and figure out the priorities as we get into the budget process coming up in the next couple of months, so that I have a really good grounding of what the needs are and what people's perspectives are, and continually refining what I hear as priorities to really get to what the real priorities are, whether by the elected officials or by the residents, and then finding a way again to get my staff to pay attention to those things and be more creative and do things that they might not have ever done before because they never had the opportunity.
So speaking of those tough issues, I'm going to just throw 3 huge ones that I'm sure everyone here has thoughts about. Housing affordability, how we get around the city, homelessness, and then, I don't know, in a way, I just want you to go in whatever direction you want with any of those. How does our approach here in Austin differ from other cities? What are things that you've taken from other cities that we could be doing here? Just however you want to go with any of that.
I always get in trouble when you compare things. I will say this, and we'll start with the housing affordability issues. I think Lila touched on some of the things and some of the things that I've actually read about, just the escalation and how fast that happened, and some of the macro issues that caused quite a bit of that. And as I've driven around and I see the marks of gentrification and just some of the housing stock and a lot of the new builds, obviously, that don't even look traditional in some neighborhoods, I know this community's done a lot, and I know the council has done quite a bit to try to help the affordability issue. I think my very first week here, I remember sitting through a 13, 14-hour meeting over, I think, the next phase of home and listen to probably 700 plus constituents get up and, in some cases, bemoan what we were doing because of its impact on some neighborhoods, but also applaud some of the aggressiveness that this council has undertaken when it comes to their land use and zoning decisions. That's why the discussion we're having today, I think, is really important. And so I think we're doing quite a bit here, probably more aggressively than a lot of other cities, and I think that's to the credit of the city council, because not everybody's happy about it, but they are not thinking about, in my opinion, what gets them elected in 2 or 3 years, but the future of this city more long-term and who we are today and who will never be again, and that's a small city. And so I think the densification tied into the next subject of mobility and a lot of the things that I see here, I think they are right on point with that. I think we're doing a lot of good things. I think if there's anything I'd say on the mobility front, and I know housing connects to homelessness and all that, and we'll get to that at the end, I would say getting going on the projects is probably what I'd say is going to be the biggest difference here. I think the wants and desires and the understanding of how to connect those two as it relates to transit-oriented development with actually transit, whether that's rapid bus transit or light rail as proposed, just getting to the construction and the movement on those things and ensuring that the planning we've done, the pre-building, and all of the displacement work that we've been doing actually marry up, and we do it the right way. And so I think we're on the right track. I think we've got the right plans to do it. It's really about execution and continued education and continued participation at the city level in helping continually buy down the cost of the housing we know is going to be put in the ground. On the homeless front, I'd say we've got to get better, more coordinated with our governmental entities and the folk actually out there at the grassroots level doing the work on the ground for us with our homeless population. Got to understand where we're spending the money. We spend quite a bit of money, not quite sure we're getting all the benefits we could on that money. I think we're duplicating a lot of services and a lot of effort. And I think at scale, the city and the other organizations that call themselves government need to take a greater hand in figuring out how we can coordinate better amongst ourselves, as well as ensure that the people leading our efforts in homelessness are going across the whole continuum, addressing all the issues, and meeting people, particularly our homeless population, where they are when it comes to their readiness for housing, the type of housing and the services that we're going to provide for them to help them stabilize there. And so we're doing a lot of work right now with those governmental entities to try to figure out where those dollars are going. Then it's just going to take the next step of really having a well thought out plan that everybody can buy into, both public and private, and find ways to spend the resources to reduce the barriers and get out of our own way in some cases on how we're doing the work. And so I think we'll do much better going forward, and we're in the process of really laying that out so that we can communicate that so people can buy into it and invest in it and participate and help us.
Well, I threw a big multi-dimensional question at you, and I really appreciate you kind of tackling that and covering so much ground there. Let's bring Dr. Valencia back into the conversation now. This could really be for either one of you, but I think of the demographer as someone who, I almost imagine you, it's like you're climbing up a tall tower so you can see over the horizon. You can sort of see what's coming, things that the rest of us can't see, but you're using your expertise to kind of see for us. What's the role of demographic data in the work that you do, or maybe in the work that you do, City Manager Broadnax, someone who consumes the data? Why is it important? How does demographic work inform the city's decisions and what city leadership is trying to do?
I can go first, sure. I think, a little bit of, I think I touched a little bit about this in the presentation, but we really, our job as demographers is, like you said, to, sort of consider the current trends and anticipate any shifts see any shifts in those trends that will help us to anticipate population change in the future. And it's important to get that information to folks at the city who are, making policy, but also implementing service provision and, planning for future infrastructure work. It's important for us to get that information to them so they can make, data-informed decisions. And I think, as the city manager mentioned earlier, city council will sort of set that vision for us, and the city manager will implement a lot of that work. And I think my job is ultimately to just provide the best data, most accurate, and kind of update information so that planning can be well informed for the city.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I told Lila I was going to let her do all the talking. I'll say this. I think Lila and her team do important work. And I think the biggest challenge we often have, obviously trying to understand and digest the work that they lay out for us, as all organizations try to be more data-driven, is to actually be driven by the data. And I think, in some cases we're not, because I think we spend a lot of time talking with people, looking at them in the lives that they live today, right? And they kind of reflect the data. So you immediately want to go in and deal with the issues that you see in front of you. And I think we've got to get better and be better students at truly making data-driven decisions. I think understanding whether and where people are leaving and where we're losing people I think it shows up in reality when you look at who used to be there and who doesn't, beyond the data points, right? You look at the people, whether it's the African American community or the Latino community, that you will look up and through history go, yeah, this area used to be this. There used to be these kinds of structures here that meant these kinds of things. And those things may not exist anymore. So that's the reality of following the data. I would say to you, I think our council's been pretty good at listening. I think our team has been good at listening. I think the reality is you see it coming, but then I guess what you prescribe to prevent certain things from happening have fallen short. And I think that's the biggest fear of city managers, and that's one of the things I'm focused on with my team, is knowing it and then figuring out how to strategize to prevent it and or to slow it down and or to be real about something we cannot slow down and articulate that and provide as much support we can for the people being impacted by it is, I think, where we find ourselves quite a bit. And as I'm learning this community, learning the history of it, seeing as I drive around some of the impacts that are different from 15 years ago, some of the promises and some of the vision of what we thought was going to be that actually turned out and became something else. It's really understanding that better so that we don't repeat the same kind of things, and that I'm not sitting here 7 years later going, yeah, they told me that was going to happen, and I didn't do anything about it. And so for me, that's the challenge, is making sure I'm having the conversations, listening to people like Lila, as well as the people that are being impacted by it, who can tell the stories, and ask them what do they think we need to do in some cases to help them and their families. Then work with the elected officials to figure out how we, again, can prioritize what the right dose of medicine is to really solve whatever that illness is.
Let's dig into maybe a specific example of one of these sort of things that is over the horizon. Question for Lila. Reflecting on your career to date as a demographer with the state and the city, what's a demographic trend that's happening now that would have surprised you, when you got into the demographic business? And I guess it could be one of your 5 trends, or it could be maybe something else.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and there's a couple of things that were surprising, but I'll quickly state, like, demographers are a hard group to surprise, right? Because you're constantly, your job is to look forward and anticipate change. But one of the things that surprised a lot of demographers, including myself, is the U.S. Life expectancy had been relatively good, compared to other countries for a really long time, and even better, right? Because we were really leveraging all those advances in healthcare and in technology. But about 2015, U.S. life expectancy really started to drop, and in fact, it really dropped and has not gone back to those levels. Even, it was exacerbated actually by the pandemic and has not gone back to those levels.
But it was before the pandemic.
But it was before the pandemic, exactly. And it is now ranked the lowest among other rich nations. And so that was something that is definitely surprising. And there's things like COVID, the opioid epidemic, gun policies in our country, a lot of policy actually that's related to these life expectancy declines. That has been surprising for, I think, demographers as a whole. But one thing that I was also surprised by, and this is more recent work that I was looking at specifically for Austin, is when I was in grad school, we used to study Japan's total fertility rate, and total fertility rate is sort of the average number of children that a woman's expected to have, and replacement level is about 2.1. So 1 child per parent, and then a little extra for people who don't have children in the population. And so that's usually the benchmark that we're looking at, because that means the population will replace itself, we'll have future workers, and we'll have population momentum to keep growing. And Japan, at the time that I was when I was in school, had a total fertility rate of 1.38. Today, Austin has a total fertility rate of 1.3. And so that's, interesting because it has real implications for how our population is growing through natural increase, how dependent we really are on our growth from migration. And it has implications, of course, for labor force and just for the general makeup of our communities.
Oh, that's a great one. Can we shift from the sort of longer term to the immediate term? I want to ask both of you, but maybe we can start with the city manager. What are you expecting for 2025? In terms of growth, jobs and economy, where are people choosing to live and work? Riff on any of that you care to.
I'm just trying to make it through the week. There's a lot going on right now. I'm a little. There's a lot of clouds in my mind, and as I listen to Lila talk, I wish I was that smart and I could get lost in the numbers. It's the practicality of back to her statement around policy decisions that impact the communities. Quite honestly, I'm focused on what I can control, so to speak, if you say it that way, and that's ensuring that the limited dollars, for me at least, from a priority standpoint, are what's on the horizon in 2025. Really digging in deep to understand and help this council refine the priorities that everybody has and get, everything that's needs to be done can't be a priority if anything is supposed to get done, right? And I think we do a lot, as I call, spreading of peanut butter. And that's, and that's nothing against how we've approached doing stuff, but I don't know if that is helping where the needs are the most. And so my focus this year will be on prioritizing what I understand to be the priorities of the community and the council. And if I had to tell you over these 8 months, I would say public safety is paramount and important, whether that's the level of and strength of our police force, the numbers, as well as even how we police, I think is important, and getting those things right based on what the community sentiments are. I'd say tackling and better addressing homelessness, which again is only being exacerbated by a lot of the other issues from affordability, and in some cases drugs, and just pricing people out of where they would like to live. And it's not your typical what you want to stereotype as the homeless population. Obviously there are folk who have been on our streets for a while, but there are newfound people who've never expected to show up and be amongst that population, just based on the old adage of one paycheck away from being something that you aren't today. I'd argue getting our long-term comprehensive plan right, to really make sure that as we plan for 20 and 30 years out, obviously we make year-to-year decisions on land use and zoning and property to property, but ensuring again that we're doing the right things that we may not ever take advantage of. And so continuing to focus on that, continuing to listen to the community and ensure we get that right. I think the mobility issues and actually moving forward and pushing out things that are going to help us, whether with climate as we begin to construct things and or build things that support lowering our carbon footprint and just being ahead of the game and actually spending the resources that the public has already said, hey, go out, we support these things, just getting those things delivered. And then just getting through this legislative session and preserving, I would argue, all of the local rights and flexibility that local governments need to be responsive to the people that are the closest to where the need is. And so I think there's a lot going on in Austin, and as Austin typically does, and I've seen in my 9 months here, we're going to be Austin no matter what's going on outside of our jurisdiction, and we'll find a way to figure out how to help the people and support the people. that call Austin home in the manner in which we've always done. And if we haven't done it to the level we've needed to do it, one of my roles is to ensure that we're finding a way to do that and be the type of city that everybody can feel like they belong to. And that was a long riff.
It was great, and you even worked in the comprehensive plan update, which is going to kick off, as I understand it, at some point. So, thank you for that. Over to you, Lila. Other than the certainty that we will experience warmer weather in 2025 than we are today, what do you got your eyes on?
Yeah, so as the year starts, I have the privilege, city manager Broadnax, to just kind of sit with the data, and I don't have to figure out how we're going to resolve that. You've got that difficult job, and so when the new year starts, I cozy up with all the new economic outlook reports, and I start with economic outlook, right, because the economy really drives migration to our region and population growth. They're very, very highly correlated. And some of the latest reports are what we're learning is that there are some signs that there could be boosts in the economy. Things like lower tax rates, deregulation. All of those things help to boost the economy, and so we could see greater job production in Austin related to those. But we also see some signs of potential restriction, right? And so anything, relating to tariffs can then produce repercussions against those tariffs. That anything relating to, spending cuts, obviously goes back to the city manager's analogy of, how much peanut butter you have to spread. And then anything relating to immigration restrictions is all of those things are going to have impacts or could have impacts on our economy, on our job growth, and the available workers. And so I think our city will continue to grow through natural increase, as it has been, about 25% or so. But migration is the big question. And that, I think is the wild card, and I don't know that we have enough information to really figure out how important, well, it's going to be an important role in 2025. I just don't know what that's going to look like yet.
It's a very fair assessment of the uncertainty.
It's only February.
It's only February, yeah. The year is young. One of your 5 observations was the slowdown in population that you're noticing and that you think may be continuing into the near term coming years. Can you just expand on what you think might be going on there? And then I'd love to get the city manager's reaction to what you say there.
Yeah, so, for a really long time, and even, still, Austin has a lot of pull factors, is what, how we refer to migration, factors. You can either pull people in and attract them or push people out. And Austin, has always had strong job growth. We have had relative affordability, and we have so many amenities that really attract people, from cultural events to green spaces and just a hip happening scene and innovative spaces, right? There's a lot happening in Austin, and so a lot of people are attracted to coming to the city. Right now, 2 of those pull factors are really waning, right? And so specifically job growth and affordability. But I think if we are able to see some of these sort of economic factors play out in a way that help to increase job growth in the Austin area, and any time that there's any major players at the federal level that have stakes in Austin, it's important to keep that in mind and keep a close watch on that. But I think if we see those economic factors impacted in a way where we're adding more job growth, I think we could start to gain some of that growth in population. But if we start to see, if we can't quite, address our affordability issues, that'll still be a challenge, which then leads to a push factor, right, where people can't afford to stay. And so the people who are leaving, as I talked a little bit about in my presentation, look a little bit different than the people who are moving here. And so right now what we're seeing is that a lot of the populations that we're receiving are populations that are more associated with slower population growth, and some of the populations that we're losing are historically associated with faster growth, right? And so how well we're able to attract people as well as retain could really determine how much our growth rate can recover.
Any reactions to any of that?
I just feel like I'm in a whole master's class sitting next to that. I'm like, why am I even up here? Let me say this. I think to the pull and push and the things that I think I would focus on in that regard is people that are here. And so there's one area, particularly around job growth, that I know if we can get it right and do what we're supposed to do, and I think our council's already ahead in that game, is infrastructure. There's a lot going to be going on, whether it's the I-35 related reconstruction, Project Connect, our airport, whether Austin Energy or our water department, got a lot of construction related jobs. And I know last year in the budget process, council began and we're recently approved an infrastructure academy to train. I think we're about 10,000 jobs short every year in construction-related jobs. In some cases, those are good-paying jobs. And so making sure that is, one, known, and we can attract people that heretofore may not have ever considered that a career opportunity. Some of our young people, as well as retraining people to go out and take advantage of what that infrastructure academy has to offer, I think is going to and can pay dividends back to keeping and allowing people to earn enough to want to actually stay here and be able to live here. I'd say secondly, as the slowdown may be happening that is different from the past here, I would argue, like other cities, and the DFW area is similar. Economic development and attracting people to want to come, I'd say that's the easy button for certain communities, whether Austin or the Dallas area. And so one of the things that I've focused on, particularly in Dallas, was, being very specific and targeted in the types of things that we work to incentivize and where we want those jobs to show up and the types and levels of salary and or the residents that live here being first in line to take advantage of companies that we're attracting here. And whether that's the targeted economic development efforts we do or where we're placing the housing, where we set what I'd call the affordability rates for where we want to target. I'm saying the city's got to be more intentional in the tools that we use to actually get to where we want to get and get the investment where we want it and not be so led around by the nose to where it's just happening. Right? And so again, I think that's one of the things hopefully I'll be able to work with our council on and our team on is really being more specific and targeted to actually put our money where we want to put it and have people put money where we would like them to put it to benefit the very people that we are most concerned about being priced out of this community.
And speaking of that, I wanted to ask, well, really, it could be either of you, but the city of Austin has something called the Strategic Housing Blueprint, which is a stated goal of the city adding 60,000 affordable units over a certain period of time. And I don't know, I have a few questions around that, and I think either of you should take in whatever direction you want. But first of all, are we making progress towards the city's goals? Does it sync up with our comprehensive plan with Imagine Austin or what we might do next to amend Imagine Austin? How does that play into, how do those strategic housing blueprint goals relate to what the city's trying to do longer term here?
Well, I'll let you. You want to try to tackle that?
Well, what I can say is that in addition to kind of providing information to help inform policy, like one of the things that our team can do and that we always try to do is to help policymakers understand if we are moving the needle, if we are moving in the direction that we said we wanted to go, right? And so we work closely with Housing Works, the nonprofit that provides a lot of the data analysis behind this and the scorecards that really help to track whether the city is staying in alignment with those
Every
goals.
year, right?
Every year, right. And so, we work with them as data partners, and we make sure that they have access to that data. And just looking at some of those, I know that we have made a lot of progress in producing a lot of affordable units, but there are still parts of the goals that we definitely need more work in, right? And so are we producing as many units as we needed to produce, or as we said we would produce in high opportunity areas? Well, we probably are still making progress towards that goal. Are we building them all around Imagine Austin centers and corridors and throughout the entire city, right? Those are still goals that we're working towards meeting. But, and this is just sort of with that data partnership that we have with Housing Works. I'm sure you've probably looked at those report cards or scorecards a little closer and have a more perspective on that.
No, and I do, and I think and I think we are making progress. And I think we can always do more. I think that's back to my statement about the intentionality of where we're doing it around those job centers. And, I would argue where the next frontier is, and a lot of the green land that I see in our Eastern Crescent and some of the areas that lack infrastructure, right? Coming up with strategies to support getting infrastructure there that then would bring about the development, but being very specific about what we get as a result of that, I think, is what I'm going to focus on, and not just leave it to, I think, people in some cases who may not have the same interest that we do when it comes to not just making money, but to actually helping solve problems that we know exist in opportunities in areas that we know we can actually fulfill some of those goals that we have.
Well, I've got a list of about 10 other questions that I could get to, but I think we've reached the point where it's time to get the audience involved here. So a couple of microphones are going to circulate, and people should just let staff members know if they've got a question. And I'm just going to ask that the questions be questions and that they be relatively brief.
Has there been any talk on how to best integrate homeless folks who prefer being homeless, because they're part of our community as well? And so that always, for me, it's a puzzle that I think about enough, and I can't really, I'm just curious what y'all think about it.
So, and again, having never been homeless, I don't want to speak for a homeless person, but I will say this: I'm not quite sure that anyone that is homeless wants to be homeless. Just say that. I'd say you probably have to ask them 16, 17 times and convince them to find and want to be in shelter. There's obviously systems at play in some cases that prevent people from wanting to be housed. And so, I'd argue whether it's a low barrier shelter and or if they, again, have other issues, co-occurring disorders or what have you, that you can get them closer to a shelter. And some shelter spaces, and I think we even have it at the Oasis and others, have outdoor safe spaces where people could actually be in a controlled environment but be able to be safe. I'd say, again, back to meeting people where they are in every part of our system, whether it's diversion, whether it's the rapid rehousing, whether it's the shelter, whether it's the permanent supportive housing, have to be flexible enough and in enough alignment to understand that people are going to be different and they have their different issues. And so I'd say just continually trying to get people housed for their own general health and well-being is what we're all about. And sometimes you got to spend a lot more time. But that one time it finally clicks, I think people, when they feel comfortable wherever you are able to place them, I've often heard that they just thank the person for not giving up on them. So I would just say it takes time, and I think some of the issue and challenge in the world if I want to be all philosophical, is folk don't like to see people suffer. And, I often say, yeah, I get it, but that's where we are. And just because you don't want to see it doesn't mean you need to call 311 every 5 minutes, because folk, you know what I mean? I think, again, so that's a complicated question, but again, I don't think anybody wants to be homeless. I think that's a resulting factor of any things that they've experienced, whether in a shelter or just the systems itself just push them out.
Hey, Professor Wegmann, it's Michael. So I think we all know some factors that have driven out diverse population from Austin. And I was just wondering, I'd imagine we want a diverse city. Is there a thought process on, welcoming and attracting and keeping a more diverse population in Austin?
I can speak to a program that I am familiar with, and I know that there are welcoming cities or designations as welcoming cities, and our Equity Office Immigrant Affairs team worked really hard to actually have Austin be one of those designated welcoming cities, and I believe last year they were able to make some gains in that direction. I think it was approved. I'm not completely sure, but I know that work is something that that is done. Of course, that's very specific to immigrant populations, and I know that there are chamber efforts in the area that are specifically reaching out to specific communities as well. But I'm not familiar with other programs or that maybe you are.
So, and Lila just touched on one, welcoming cities. And so Dallas actually, and I think we just got designated as a two-star welcoming community. Well, Dallas is a welcoming community. We were actually the first and only city in the state to be designated and certified as a welcoming city, probably about 2 years ago. And so I'm proud of that. I will tell you, again, back to the word for the day, intentionality. I think the focus on, and obviously recently combined a few offices to really focus in 3 different lanes of equitable related service delivery and how we reach out to the community. But I would say beyond welcoming communities, I think it's the intentionality of the conversations. I know in Dallas, and I think, I'm not quite sure we do it here, we started an equity indicators program that spoke to back to data and demographics, just where and who was disproportionately impacted across a lot of areas, and then had an active work effort to try to eliminate and reduce those disparities across the entirety of our city operation, as well as our outside partners and their respective private businesses. So there are some efforts and activities that cities can undertake, understanding that is a big topic these days in the national politic and state politics as it relates to that intentionality. But I think that's work that, as we think about it, what cuts through all of that is individuals, where they are, and what their plight in lives are, which are similar regardless of race if you're focusing on the common denominator, and that is poverty and income disparities. And so we're going to focus on that kind of work. We're already doing it. I think we're going to do more of it. But I think it's back to data and actually listening to the data and trying to get in and establish programs and or activities that are already either being done and or can be tweaked to actually help us remediate some of the issues and challenges. So great question.
Good afternoon. I'm an economist, and I've become an advocate in city politics, trying to lower the rent, partially because that's a good thing for most of the populace. The other thing is that it's tied to homelessness. The highest correlation I've ever seen for homelessness is market rents. So when you were talking about affordability, Mr. Broadnax, you mentioned new builds don't fit into the neighborhood and gentrification. Could you talk about what's not fitting in, what you see that you don't like?
Okay, well, you got a whole note, got like a notebook up there. It was like a whole loaded question, I will tell you. So being a person that I guess has spent a lot of time around a lot of folk that I would say are historic preservationists, my statement around that when I say don't fit is really out of character with, I think, what the rest of the neighborhood looks like. And so just at a visual perspective, I meant out of character from a design perspective with, as I call them, or we used to call them in Dallas, Tron homes that, right, that, you know, in some cases are built, in some cases when you look at housing, not things that the city may be partaking in, are really geared and tied to short-term rentals, right? And so that the rental rates obviously wouldn't equate to and have someone actually living in them, but it's the market-driven pieces that they stand out. So that's what I meant by that. I didn't understand the second part of your question. I'm sorry. If that didn't answer the whole question, I think you...
That did answer my question.
Okay, and so that was not a disparaging, you know, remark other than, again, if you have traditionally lived in a neighborhood that has the same kind of structures, you know, when you begin to see infill housing that looks totally different because there are no design guidelines because it's not in a historic district or something like that, I think it's striking in some cases as it relates to the character of a neighborhood. So that's what I meant.
Hello? Hi.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Sorry. You talked earlier about the shifting demographics. That's the whole point of today. And you also talked about the matching up of policy and intended outcomes with the execution. We're kind of sitting at the beginning of a update to the strategic plan. Is there going to be a big component of that to ensure that the plan is kept up to date with both the demographics as well as the learnings along the way? Because I feel like there are a lot of things that we have not necessarily delivered as a community over the past couple decades, like their bond issues, their bond things that are open for decades. And so I feel like knowing and reassuring the community that we're going to have a lot of firsts, we're going to go through a lot of changes, but we're going to get better along the way would be great to hear. I'm not sure this is really a question, but
That was
yeah.
for Lila?
Yes. Well, just say it's all going to be okay.
So let me say this.
It's all gonna be okay.
I wish I could say that sometimes. So let me say this. And so while Austin may feel and believe, particularly around, let's say, bond issues and things that voters have voted on, that is not uncharacteristic of larger cities. I'll give the example. When I first arrived in Dallas, I think I came in 2017. And we were embarking, I think I was 2 months in, and they held it up just for me to have some fingerprints on it, a bond development as well as an election in November of 2017. And I think we delivered probably one of the largest bond packages, about $1 billion, $1.2 billion actually. And what was found out and known at the time was they were still in Dallas, still had open dollars to spend down from 2003 bonds and a 2006 bond and a 2012 bond. And frustrating, not as much as we have here, but just the notion that we had 12 plus years of open, non-expended bond funds. And some of that was because of partnerships and other things we were waiting on. But we made a commitment in Dallas in that bond proposition that we would deliver at least at a 90% level in the 5 years, because we did bond programs every 5 or 6 years, that we would be at a 90% level, not only with the bond program in 2017, but get through and expend all the resources in the prior bonds at the same time. And we actually accomplished that as we and they moved into the bond program for 2024 that they just voted on, I believe, in November, and it was approved. And so I would say to you this, back to, again, delivering projects. That's one of the things that I will be working on with our newly created capital delivery department, to really getting that going and making that commitment that, one, we're going to show what we do and show our work along the way, but really drive through accountability, trying to get that done. Now, again, we're talking across all different types, not just general obligation, but actually revenue bonds, some $7-8 million worth of pent-up bonds, but at least the general obligation bond portion, I'm going to make sure we're working on. Some of the other stuff is tied up and already has a plan. But that's going to be my commitment and what I'm going to be working towards with my team. Truthfully, as folk come out and vote for a bond, they actually want to see the stuff being done, particularly before they get asked to vote again, right? And particularly those folk who get the distinct privilege for folk to say, you know what, maybe in the next bond issue, we'll address what you want. And I think we've got to deliver and show some results to at least keep incentivizing people to want to come out and support us. And so you got my commitment to work with my team to do that and be more transparent about it. But yeah, if y'all are perturbed by it, I've only been here 9 months, and I would be perturbed by it, and I will be perturbed if we can't make progress. So I appreciate the question, and hopefully my team is watching that, and they're out digging up stuff right now.
Hi. My question is about green spaces. Y'all talked a lot about exciting infrastructure and job growth, especially in the construction sector, but we all know the importance of green spaces to growth and quality of his life. So what do green spaces look like in Austin's future?
There's no people there. This one's yours.
I did not sign. Did I sign up for all of this? So listen, if there's one thing, and I've only been here 9 months, that I know and have heard is that open space and parks and trails and all those connected, whether it's, the benchmarks we use for how far parks and open spaces need to be from dwellings and others, that Austin actually gets that, and we support that. And so I'd say if the past has been good, I know the future will only be better. And I would say this, my focus, because I know the rest, I won't say will take care of itself, because there's enough advocacy, and, parks are, happy people's work, right? And is really ensuring that once we build a park, that we can actually maintain a park, and the parks that we already have, that we're allocating enough resources to actually maintain those and make them enjoyable for people to go and safe for them to go. And so that will be my focal point. I heard that loud and clear last year during the budget process, that we weren't doing enough there. And I'd argue, as we commit to building more parks and or accepting more parks, we really got to belly up and understand, okay, so what is it going to take to maintain these parks? And so again, I think this city is focused on that. I think as we talk about things around whether it's climate or anything, parks and open spaces and trees and everything that comes with that is built into the fabric of what Austin is and what's made Austin. So I don't think that will actually slow down or not be a focal point. And so I just appreciate the question, and it's probably the easiest question I could have all day.
Well, it's hard to believe, but I think we've just about reached the end here. Now, one thing, I think we were going to show a couple of upcoming community events. Cue a couple of slides here, but those are going to flash on the screen behind you in a series of slides. And if you want to get the details on those, I think there will be some QR codes on those slides. So, whip out your phones and take pictures of those if you want more details. But otherwise, I'm going to give a big thank you to our, two dedicated public servants here who took time out of their busy schedules and, shared so much of their expertise and wisdom with us today. And thanks to the planning department for putting on this, this big event. And thank you to the staff from the Carver Museum and Library for use of their beautiful facilities. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you out there. Take care.